Okay, here's another video about the information lacking in Snap-on. So it's 17.2, which is pretty much up to date. I'm working on a Volkswagen Beetle 2005. Auto ID won't work, so I go to manual. I go to Beetle Cabrio. It's 1.8 liter turbocharged with the VIN D BKF engine. Everything's good so far. I go to engine management. And this is where it gets interesting. I got codes, clear codes, function tests, review ECU, stop communication. There's no data PIDs, nothing. It doesn't even let me go into generic here. I mean, come on, this is a 2005. And there is no data values that I can watch. I pretty much have to go to OBD2 Direct. Home button. Go to OBD2 Direct to find the information. I'm just going to do that and see what it shows. So I went into OBD Generic, and obviously I can see data PIDs here. But for a car that's 12 years old, I should not have to go into OBD2 Generic. Snap-on should realistically have dealer-specific data PIDs. Just like it does for other vehicles, but you know, of similar years. I'll just go back out here. So it's still a current ongoing issue with these Snap-on updates. 94 Golf CL, that's the little 1.8 liter automatic transmission, no start, no crank. Turns out the wiring for the park neutral safety switch, or the transmission range switch, which tells the transmission computer what gear it's in, those wires are melted, touching stuff. The computer thought it was always in drive, so fixed some wiring. It was rubbing along here. Should be good as new again then. All nicely wrapped back together. Yeah, soldered, crimp connected, everything. Maybe 2 or 3 rolls of electric tape. It's good to go again. 07 Audi A3. DSG, looks like there's some leaking going on here. I've heard that certain filter kits cause leaks. I guess maybe the O-ring or something. This is the first. I don't know why this thing keeps taking pictures while I'm zooming. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I'm not sure if certain brands, or which they are, that cause the leaks or are prone to leaks. So as you can see, the filter is all greasy looking, and obviously quite a lot of fluid around the filter, around the base of the housing, as well as underneath the transmission. And when I drained it, it seemed to be less than normal. So obviously there is enough loss of fluid, not to the point where it affected shifting, because it seemed to be shifting fine and there were no codes. But it's definitely well worth checking into when you see oil leaks, you know, be it engine oil or transmission oil. Once you spot something on your ground, or on the ground in the parking lot, at home, in the driveway, definitely have it looked at. It's called preventative maintenance. Sorry, I had a blonde moment. I told you to check the to disconnect the connector for the little fan. This is the big fan with the fan control module. This is the main harness connector at the bottom of the radiator. And then I told you to disconnect this one and check for a signal to the small fan. But obviously you can't get to this connector with the fan shroud in its place. So you pretty much have to remove the whole assembly in order to verify if you get a signal or not. Sorry about that, had a blonde moment, wasn't quite thinking there. 2010 CC rear trunk central electrics do not work. When the trunk is closed, you can't open it. He has to go in through the manual release. With the trunk open, everything works fine. So this is a wiring harness that goes up along the pivot pipe here. So when the trunk is closed, there is a pinch right here in the harness, and that causes the inoperative central locking. So with the trunk up right now, everything works perfect. With the trunk down, it doesn't, but as soon as I wiggle this corner here, the central locking works again. I can open up the lid with the remote, or with the button, or with the emblem, the button in the car, or the emblem in the trunk lid. So it needs a wiring harness. Here's a good example why you don't want to just rely on blowing through it or sucking air through the valve to determine if it's good or not. When I first blew through it or tried to suck on it, it felt good to me. But as you can see here, I'm pumping a vacuum, and I capped the end right now. So it is holding vacuum right now, but if I remove the cap, you can see the vacuum dropping off. So there is a small leak in here, not enough to make you think that it's bad if you blow through it manually. So keep that in mind. Using a vacuum pump is probably the best way to go. It's the joys of working on older Volkswagens. That's all the rust that came off when working on the rear suspension. That's all the rust and debris that came off on the front. Just a little bit of extra info here. A lot of people always ask me, how do I remove this, how do I remove that, even when they have the service manual, because the service manual doesn't go into great detail on how to remove items step by step. People sometimes struggle with figuring out how to remove stuff. I usually respond, remove what you have to in order to remove what you want to remove. In this case, Vanagon shock. You saw the prior video bit of all the rust, and you can see that this shock is quite rusty, and it's been in the vehicle for quite a while. Even the upper threads here all rusty. But what happened on this one, which was quite common, I used to see that a lot on the older vehicles. We don't get too many old vehicles in the shop these days. Even the Vanagons are starting to die out. But anyways, what happens is that the shock bushing, there's a rubber bushing in here, and this metal sleeve is bonded to the rubber, and that's what isolates the shock, or gives it a little bit of a cushion. But what happens over the years is the bolt itself fuses to this bushing, and so when I use my impact to turn this bolt, this bushing started to spin. Sorry, this metal sleeve started to spin inside the bushing, and the bolt would not come out because of that. So what I ended up doing was I took the oxyacetylene cutting torch. I basically just cut this thing open, and that's when you saw me use the impact hammer to spread this. Once that was spread, I was able to get the torch in there again and burn off the rubber. I don't have the rubber pieces, but I think that was also in that video a little bit, or shown with the rust debris. So you burn off that rubber. Caution: do not breathe in that smoke, those fumes. I'm pretty sure that stuff is toxic. So anyways, once all the rubber is gone, then you continue to heat this sleeve until it's nice and cherry red hot. And obviously what that does is it expands the sleeve. And whenever something is heated up, it expands. And then I took my center punch and I just punched that bolt out. So sometimes you got to do what you have to do. Think outside of the box. I get quite a few comments where people actually post methods that they did that I did not think about, you know, in terms of doing something. So sharing bits and pieces like that can help others. It may sound trivial or insignificant to you, you know, what you did in terms of when you got stuck on something and you wanted to remove something, then you thought of something to do. And again, you think that it's not a big deal, but that little bit of information might actually help somebody. So making little videos, posting tips are a huge lifesaver for people. So anyways, I just thought I'd show you this, that if you have a cutting torch, or sorry, if the bolt is seized and stuck, next best thing, cut the bottom of the shock. Obviously you have to be careful, you don't want to overheat this thing too much, especially when they're gas charged. That can cause other issues. But basically burning that off, heating it up, that freed up the bolt. Thanks for watching. The old fuel pump check reveals mold, food scraps, and that's a nesting ground. And there's the child seat, you know, look at that mold. It's a little too bright, sorry. It's not actually white in color, this is all gray. That might be a better angle. If you have kids, clean these things on a weekly basis. 2011 Golf Common Rail TDI. Somebody was mentioning that on his or her vehicle that this was part of this. On this model, it isn't. You can see there's the bypass valve, but there's nothing that connects to it. So this oil filter is what plugs that down there. 2009 City Golf or Golf City, no start, crank's okay, check engine light's not on. Obviously, first thing we usually check is the fuses, all the fuses at the side of the instrument cluster, and then also the power supply relay. And that didn't solve anything, so then I went through the wiring diagram, checked all the powers, marked them off, you know, as I went through them, and then followed the circuit track, and etc., etc. And then I came up to the computer here, did powers and grounds here, and then I was checking this red and green one, which is supposed to have power, which it didn't. And sure enough, when I wiggled it, it broke right off, right here. So this whole wiring harness was wet. I'm not sure if that may very well be a factory connector here, or solder joint or junction where the power splits, because that wire does split somewhere else. So anyways, at least I'm happy I found the power problem to the computer. With the key on, that's supposed to have power, which it didn't. This end didn't. Anyways, I just started the car, I bridged it, and it went to crank it, and first thing I see is 318. Holy crap. My co-workers don't believe me, but I jumped the wire. Went to reach in through the steering wheel, and it's 318.
Which wire is that?
Crazy. It's probably from a prior timing belt change, a ball bearing that was left over. Lucky it didn't fall out while the engine was running. Could have caused damage. We found some more bearings, so there was one here There's 4 more there. There's 3 under there. So there's 1 more in the corner here. Somewhere along the line, something let loose and these bearings went flying.